Hi everybody, welcome back to the journey of my YouTube channel, which I have not posted on in kind of a long time for a couple reasons. One reason is that I was editing my own book on deadline, and the other reason is that I went to the Realm Makers Writing Conference, which was fantastic, and you're going to hear more about that in my next couple of videos if you're interested in that and if you decide to watch said videos. And at any rate, I'm going to be talking about it in my next couple of videos because it was such a fun bookish event, and I got lots of new books and I got to meet lots of authors, and I think that will be really fun to talk about. But before I get there, I want to go ahead and do the mid-year freakout tag because it's one of my favorite booktube tags. It's so much fun. I've been looking forward to it for a while, and I realize at this point we are more than halfway through the year, which is crazy. But this is really more of a 7/12 of the year freakout tag, kind of like almost a 2/3 of the year freakout tag. But I'll go ahead and answer the tag questions, and I am actually doing a revamped version of this tag. I'm using the question list from Jesse the Reader, so I will link to his video down below so that you can go check out the original version of these revamped questions. I didn't come up with these aren't mine, but I think they sound cool. I think they sound even cooler than the original freakout tag questions, which were already fun. So I'm looking forward to diving into these. The first question, it just starts right off with the very hardest question, is what is the best book that you have read this year so far? And for me, this was hard, but I feel like I have to go with The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle, which is, it's short, it's simple, it's kind of a standalone. There are a couple more novellas and I think short stories in the world of this book, but like it's simple, but it's so powerful. I actually saw the movie of this before I read the book, which I know is a terrible thing to do, but in this case it worked out because it definitely made me read the book. I saw last year the 1982 animated movie of this book, which has no right to be as good as it is. It is such a good movie. It looks at first like it's just going to be your typical kids animated movie. It looks a little bit My Little Pony at first, and then just the farther in you go, the more you're like, oh my goodness, this is a really good story, and this has a lot of depth, and is really more for adults than for kids. It's not really a kid's story, even though it is about a unicorn. The characters are just so good, the themes are really deep, and the prose, the word craft is just amazing in this. There are so many lines that just made me stop and think for a minute before I could even keep going, and the ending is so satisfying. I mentioned before in my videos that I'm really picky about book endings, and The Last Unicorn totally sticks the landing in my opinion. So I think this is my favorite book that I have read so far this year. Close runners up would be The Tombs of Atuan, which I already made a video about that, as well as The Little Prince, which is a kid's book, like an actual kid's book, but again, I feel like it's kind of more for adults, but I haven't checked out a genuine kids book from the library for a long time, so I was like a little bit embarrassed about that until I read it, and then I was like, no, this is so good. This definitely is not something to be embarrassed about checking out. It's a very high quality book. And then also Assassin's Apprentice is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, which I'm going to mention again a little bit later in this video. Question 2 is, what is the most disappointing book you've read so far this year? Which I always feel bad about this one, no matter which book I say, and I especially feel bad about this one because for me, I would have to say that it was Empire of Silence, which, like, I'm sorry, Danny Dabbles, because I know that she loves this book. A whole lot of people love this book. Very popular book. It's lots of rave reviews. A lot of people love it, and I understand why people love it because the world building is really cool. It's a really interesting premise about this this young man who is kind of on a hero's journey, except that we also know he's going to end up doing some pretty terrible things. He's going to destroy a sun. He's going to wipe out an alien race that he was kind of trying to help, it would seem. So there's just a lot of really interesting things about it. It's sci-fi, but it also feels very much like epic fantasy in a lot of ways. So it's really neat world building. It's ginormous, so if you're invested in it, you're going to be really invested in it. There's a long first book and then a long series. So basically just what I'm saying is I do get why people like it, but it just did not work for me. I did and did not like the main character. The whole book is written as the main character very far into his inhumanly long lifespan, looking back on his youth and recording what happened, and it has a lot of his perspective in the present on what happened in the past. And like older Hadrian I did like, younger Hadrian I did not like, and unfortunately we're spending most of our time with younger Hadrian. We're not always getting those comments from older Hadrian, and I just found him to be kind of whiny and self-pitying and selfish, and I was not a big fan of him. I know he went through some hard things, but I still was not really a fan of how he was responding to said hard things. And I felt like the plot moved very slowly, and there were a lot of episodes in the plot that I was like, I don't see how this is advancing the overall goal or structure in any way. Maybe all of that stuff comes back later and is really important and awesome to the story, but I just wasn't seeing it. And I like had really big high expectations for this book because I'd heard so many booktubers talk about it. I heard so many people have rave reviews for it, so that's probably one reason why it just wasn't hitting right for me, because I had these big inflated expectations of it. I could make another video talking just exclusively about my struggles with this book, because there's a lot that I could say on that front. It definitely has strengths, it definitely has good points, but yeah, just not for me. Question 3 is, what is the best book recommendation that you've received this year? And this is where I'm going to talk about Assassin's Apprentice again, because this is another book that I read specifically because so many booktubers talked about it, and I am really glad that I picked this one up. I enjoyed it a lot. I think everything that I didn't enjoy about Empire of Silence, I did enjoy about Assassin's Apprentice, and that I really like the characters in Assassin's Apprentice. I really like their relationships, even though it is another kind of slow burn type of plot. I did feel like everything ended up having significance, and I could see how it was all building, and then there was a really satisfying climax that came at the end of it. So yeah, thank you BookTube for that one. I'm reading Royal Assassin right now. I'm planning to read several more books in this series, so very glad that you guys helped me discover this one. Question 4 is, what was your first DNF of the year? And I have to pick Empire of Silence for this one again, because that is actually the only book that I've DNF'd this year. So again, I'm sorry, fans of this book, but I only made it halfway through. There was one particular scene that I was looking forward to. I was like, this event has to happen at some point in the book, and maybe when this particular event happens, like, that will kick things off, and I will start, really liking this book and understanding the hype, and I will go for the rest of it. And then that event happened at pretty much the exact halfway mark, and I was like, okay, that was underwhelming. That didn't really hit my buttons either. So that was when I decided to DNF it pretty much exactly halfway through. So if you guys want to let me know that, like, the second half of the book is when it gets really awesome, like, feel free to tell me that and to argue for the second half of the book, and maybe I will try it again at some point. But I just didn't find myself wanting to read it, so I decided to set it down for now. Question 5 is a new release from this year that you've read and your thoughts on it. And for this one, I picked Tress of the Emerald Sea, which I could also have picked for best recommendation for the year, because this is yet another book that I read specifically because so many booktubers were talking about it. I was determined that I was only going to read one Brandon Sanderson this year, and it was going to be Rhythm of War, because I read so many Brandon Sanderson books last year. I made a video about that too that I'll link to. So this year I was like, this is going to be not the year of Sanderson for me. This is going to be my Sanderson break. I'm only going to read Rhythm of War. But then everybody was like, Tress of the Emerald Sea is awesome, so I caved and I bought it and I read it. And I am glad that I did, because this is actually in my top 5 Brandon Sanderson books, potentially. I really liked it a lot. I did have some quibbles with it. The narrative voice has a lot of telling rather than showing. And there were times when I liked that. There were times when I felt like it fit well, it paid off. But there were times when I was like, I really kind of wish that you had shown me that instead of telling me that, or you already showed me that, you didn't need to tell me that again. There are a lot of narrative digressions, which sometimes I liked, and sometimes they didn't hit the mark for me. Sometimes I was like, that was supposed to be funny, and it didn't really make me laugh. But overall, I thought that this was one of Brandon Sanderson's best works. I thought it had some of his best characters, some of his best relationships and dynamics, and the world building is just classic Brandon Sanderson. It's very different in detail from what we've seen from him before, but everything you love about Brandon Sanderson world building is present in this book, even though, as far as I know, it's a standalone. It's far from his longest book. It has some very detailed and interesting and fun world building. It's just so much fun. It's such a fun book. It doesn't take itself too seriously, just seriously enough. And of course, there are some crazy plot twists that that maybe you'll see them coming, or maybe they will totally surprise you. One of them really took me off guard, and I was annoyed that it took me off guard because I think I should have seen it coming, but I did not. So yeah, overall, this one was great. I liked it a lot. Thank you for convincing me to read it, BookTube. Question 6 is a book that came out in the first half of the year that you want to read, and a book coming out in the second half of the year that you're anticipating. So for the first half of this year, I am looking forward to Fugitive of Talionis by C.J. Malasey, who I actually met at the Realm Makers Writing Conference, so I'll be talking more about all of that soon. And I'm just remembering that I have some swag in the front of this book that was about to fall out, so got lots of fun swag here that, again, I will talk more about in a future video. But Fugitive of Talionis is the second in a series. The first book is Recruit of Talionis, and as you can tell by the bookmark, I am currently reading this one, and I am enjoying it. It has been a good time. It is basically like Harry Potter meets the Hunger Games, where it's dystopian, but also like the dystopian equivalent of a magic school. So I think if you like both Harry Potter and the Hunger Games, you will probably be a fan of this series. And yeah, it is brand new, and the author is a super fun person, and I am looking forward to seeing where the series goes in this book. I am not looking at this book too much yet because I don't want any spoilers for the ending of the first one, but I love the cover. Isn't that a cool cover? So I'm looking forward to reading that one soon. And then for the second half of the year, I've already talked about this one. I've already mentioned it in videos. I'll try to find one that I can link for you guys, but it's The Fairy Queen. I am so excited for this project. It's a modern translation / update of The Fairy Queen by Edmund Spenser, which is an epic poem from the 1500s, and I am really excited to see this book. I'm almost equally excited for the book and for the illustrations from Justin Gerard. Like, this is not just going to be a really cool story and a really cool way to bring an old story into the present, but it's also just going to look fantastic, and I can't wait to see it. Question 7 is, what's the most beautiful book you've added to your collection this year, or a beautiful book you'd like to own? But I'm going with one that I did add to my collection, and that is Westward Ho, which I created a short about. I don't know if you can see the detail on the cover. It probably looks like plain brown if you can't see the detail, but there is some cool detail on the front cover there that looks really neat, and then the spine is really where it gets fancy. So it's very simple on the front and on the back, but the spine is very fancy, and then on the inside it just has that classic old book look. It's yellowed. I think it has a cool title. It has, again, simple but kind of neat there on that page, and it has this cool engraving with the ships. Like, how awesome is that? And I picked this up for $9, I think, at a used bookstore. Oh yeah, look at this page. So yeah, I love this book. I'm so glad that I have a pretty edition of it. I just read it as an ebook when I read it previously. So yeah, very excited to reread this classic at some point. And yeah, this is probably the prettiest book that I've added to my collection. But I did get several pretty books at Realm Makers as well. So when I talk about those books, you will get to see those. Question 8 is, what genre have you read the most from this year? And this one's pretty easy. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised at this point that it's fantasy, which has been a little bit of a shift for me because in the last couple of years, I've tried to read outside of fantasy more, and this year I've returned to fantasy a little bit farther. I'm still making sure that I'm reading other genres. I still love other genres, but fantasy is definitely where I live, and I kind of visit the other genres. And then question 9 is going to kind of expand on that, because question 9 is, do you feel your reading tastes have changed or shifted at all this year? Like a new genre, a new favorite trope, new favorite theme? And what I've kind of discovered about my reading taste this year, at least my reading taste right now, is that what I really love to read is fantasy that feels like classic fantasy, but that has some kind of unique element, like unique world building or unique character dynamic or something. And I actually, for all of the fact that I am kind of a plot-driven writer and that I love plot, my favorite books tend to be very character-centric and relationship-centric, and then I want a really interesting plot and world building and magic system and everything that flows out from that. But I've been finding with like Orson Scott Card's books, even though those are sci-fi, not fantasy, and with books like The Last Unicorn and the Farseer trilogy, my favorite books are really the ones where if absolutely nothing happened, I would still love to read them because of the characters. So that's been a learning experience for me. I didn't think I was that kind of reader, and I especially love these books that have just that tone of sadness and loss and something bigger beyond just the surface level of the story. I also like stories that can have a lot of fun, though. Stories that can balance the humor and lightheartedness with just the fact that they will make you cry even if you're like, I don't even know why I'm sad. So that is my kind of book. I'm learning more and more about what my kind of book is. So if you have any recommendations of fantasy books that fit that description, if that description makes any sense at all, then please let me know, because I am definitely looking for more books in that vein. Question 10 is, if you set any bookish goals for yourself this year, how are they going? My reading goal for this year was 80 books, and to not read much more than 80 books, because I don't want to push myself too hard to just run through books as quickly as possible and then maybe not enjoy them as much as I should. But I still was hoping to hit 80 books this year, and so far I am right on track for that, which is kind of surprising because I've had some slower reading months. But yeah, so far I am pretty much exactly 7/12 of the way through. Question 11 is, what book format have you been gravitating toward this year? And there's really no change in that for me. I love my physical books. I especially love hardcovers. I talked about this in a previous tag about what would be your perfect book. I really love physical books. I love hardcovers. I kind of want to try more audiobooks, so if there are any audiobooks that are just really amazing as audiobooks that you think I should listen to, especially of classics or something that you've seen that I've already read, because I'd be interested in like doing audiobooks for rereads. Yeah, let me know about that if you have any recommendations, but I don't do that much right now. And then lastly, question 12 is a book that you've read so far this year that you feel embodies the vibe of your reading year. So here we're gonna end where we began, with The Last Unicorn. I think The Last Unicorn is the prime example of what I was talking about a couple questions ago for what I'm discovering that I really like in a fantasy book. So I won't rehash all of that, but basically this is character and relationship centered fantasy with world building that I really love, but it's simple world building and it's mostly about the characters and how they interact with the world building, and it's very sad, but it's also very funny at times, and I love the tone of it. I love how it feels. Like I said, the prose is amazing. So yeah, I will conclude this list with what began the list. Okay, that was my mid-year / 7/12 of the year freakout tag. If you've done this tag already, please let me know so that I can watch your video too. And if you haven't done this tag yet, I would love for you to do it and let me know when you do it. If you don't have your own channel, if you're just a reader, if you're just watching, let me know how you would answer these questions. Let me know how your reading year is going so far. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked this video and if you want to see more of them like it. And if you would like updates on my writing journey and more behind the scenes info on what I think about the books that I'm reading, then you can join my email list, and I will leave a link for that below as well. And like I said, I'm about to make some videos about the Realm Makers Conference that I'm really excited to show you. So until then, thank you for journeying with me, and I will see you next time. Bye!